Thanks, Brian. So Brian, your response wasn't recorded, but the rest of them will be. It's hard. I can't see all the special guests, so I don't know if anyone's signaling that they want to talk, but I want to give Sharon an opportunity if she wants to jump in. And then after that, either Steve Kramer or John Z, and then we'll move on to the next question. Sharon, do you want to add anything? You don't have to.
Sure. Actually, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that some of the students have those experiences. That's not what we want to hear, but understand things like this happen. We had a TA training for remote teaching that more than 1,000 graduate students across from campus participated in. Zoom being, just for example, I look at myself, this is the first time I'm actively participating in a meeting on Zoom, and I had to look up where the raise your hand icon is. So we have to give our instructors a bit of grace with using technology. Graduate students are at the mercy of the faculty who are teaching the course, and they might at the last minute change something. So I also want to make sure that we're like, there's things that TA is out of the hand of the TAs. Certainly not showing up to classes that they should have been showing up to, that's not acceptable. And again, we also had we created a structure of batch leads that each groups of departments have support staff attached to them. Did all of our instructors use those? Unfortunately, no. There's always the fact that there are 20–25% of any population that no matter how hard you try, they will not engage with you. And we will try to find them and help them get where they need to be.
Thank you. John Z, anything you want to add here? Otherwise, we can move on to the next question.
I don't have a lot to add and want to leave plenty of time for lots of questions other than to echo what Sharon said about feeling very bad that students are having some of those kinds of experiences. We know they are, and the thing I would say is we need to know about those experiences, you know, not necessarily this faculty member and that kind of thing, but definitely we want to know the kinds of experiences students are having, so that we can build support and outreach and communication to instructors to try to improve.
Thank you. Emily Dickman, are you going to call on people with hands raised? I forgot to.
Yeah, I'll call on
took
people.
that over.
Yeah, thanks, Ren. I'll call on people with hands raised. And I just want to say to John's point that there are a number of things coming up in the chat where advisors are sharing examples of some of the struggles that students are facing right now. And so I'm not going to name or reread all of those in the moment, but we are going to capture those and then share them with all of our guests here today so they can take them back to their offices and roles. And I don't know what order these came in, but so apologies in advance, but I'm going to call on Joanna first. You had your hand raised, and then Brianna and Matt.
I just wanted to ask, actually, on behalf of one of my faculty members, they approached me the other day and said that they have a student in one of their classes who is sick. At the time, it had not been confirmed whether it was COVID or not, but it was suspected. And he had actually received a message from the student's parent saying, you know, I will be communicating with you about assignments and, you know, information about the class, and anything you need from this student, please come to me and ask. And what he basically wanted to know, and he and I did talk a little bit about FERPA and stuff, is, you know, what are ways that he can keep the students' information and progress private from the parent, while still understanding that if this student is sick and sick long-term, that this parent is trying to help them by being the intermediary for the assignments and work and stuff, and trying to help the student, and how he finds that balance between saying, well, I really need to communicate with your child, and acknowledging the fact that this student might not be awake for 16 hours of the day because they're very sick. Like, what, if anybody has any tips, tricks, links, suggestions for this faculty member, because he's very conscientious about protecting the students' rights and privacy.
Thank you, Joanna. Do any of our guests want to weigh in on that one? I can't see all of you, and I'm not sure which one of you might be ready to talk about that.
Ren, this is Steve. I have now figured out how to operate the controls on Zoom. So thank you for letting me weigh in. You know, in the situation that you just described, Joanna, I think the easiest thing, if the student feels comfortable, would be to sign a FERPA release to be able to share academic information with the parent. And then that awkwardness would be taken out of the equation. Now, that may be a delicate question to ask the student, but you know, if there's reluctance, then by all means he shouldn't sign that. But if he's at home and fully comfortable doing that, then that would be the solution.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
I would agree. I would agree with Steve. And I saw Beth sort of shaking her head, yes. With regards FERPA, the best thing to do is just to get the student to sign the FERPA release so that the instructor can communicate at all times with the family. I wasn't sure whether, the other thing that I wanted to just confirm with you in terms of the instructor, so I wasn't sure if I heard you say that the parent now wanted to know like when assignments were due and those kinds of things. I don't think that an instructor needs to do that extra. You know, also remembering, oh, I've got Johnny's mom and dad I got to communicate with now because they haven't been in class. I think it's the student's responsibility to be able to check their Blackboard in the same way that other students, and the parent needs to understand that. Because especially if this is a freshman, the parent may not understand that this is not like high school or elementary. The instructor is not going to reach out to them, nor are they going to tell them, hey, there's an exam coming up in a week. That's not going to happen, nor should we expect our instructors to do that. That's what I advise instructors in engineering to do. We can only go so far. And that's the other thing that I would make very clear, that the instructor communicate that to the parent.
And of course, the wild
Thank you,
part here is we don't know exactly how sick this student is at this moment. You know, we're only hearing from the parent. But most of all, the instructor wants to be respectful of the student's privacy. That's his main concern. Things like missing deadlines, he's more than willing to work with the student, you know, and do extensions, do special arrangements. He just wants to make sure that with his limited amount of information about the relationship between the student and the parent, that he's doing the right thing.
Yeah. And what I would say with regards how sick, it really doesn't matter how sick. If the student is very sick, then this is the last thing they need to worry about right now. They need to put a pause, right? And the instructor then can work with the student to put a pause. If it's going to be a long-term sickness throughout the rest of the semester, then that's a conversation with an advisor, not necessarily the instructor. It moves to the advisor then, so that the advisor can help them navigate to, is it still feasible for them to stay enrolled as a student? You know, how long is this going to last? Have they missed a critical exam? And have they been out now for 4 weeks that they really cannot make up? You know, my experiences in engineering, making up 4 weeks of assignments is almost impossible in any of the technical type courses that happen in engineering. So that isn't something that we would be advising a student to do. So that's the other thing I would say, is that any advisors in these situations, right? They use their own expertise in that regard.
Thank you. Emily, let's move on to the next question.
Okay, so Brianna is next, and then Matt, and then Molly. There have also been some questions related to housing in the chat. I want to let participants know that we'll get to those in a bit after we focus on the instructional stuff. Brianna.
My question was kind of on the higher levels. I have seen a lot of the technology and the training that has come out for faculty, staff, TAs, things like that. And I really appreciate those efforts. I think what I don't have an understanding of is kind of on a leadership level, in like maybe selecting a few of these technologies and like having broader groups on board, because I mean, as a staff member, it's a little bit, I mean, I can go to a lot of trainings and stuff like that, but, and you can, you can learn things, but I think without having some sort of like group effort to either try to say like all advising is going to happen on this platform or all, I mean, Canvas, right, is the instructional platform, but like, this is the way that things are going to happen for students across the university, like on this broader level. I find students struggling with that. Like for this class, we're using this technology and this, you know, option, and it takes everyone a while to learn a tool. So I think there is a lot of grace for that. But when you have, you know, thousands and thousands of people that are trying to use different technologies, I was just wondering if like leadership, I don't have a good pulse on that on a campus level.
Thank you. That's a really important piece of feedback, I think, more than anything. But panelists, would any of you, or special guests, it's not a panel, would any of you like to respond to that? I can see most of you now, so if you wave, I might be able to call on you. Sean.
So I'm, in addition to being associate professor in psych, I'm the chair of the Information Technology Committee. And so we've spoken about that with respect to video conferencing options. Obviously, we have a significant suite of options available. And one thing that I know leadership has talked about is that it's an interesting time with respect to typical Wisconsin perspectives, which is to give people options and to let them, you know, decide what they think best practices are. And, you know, if any of you have seen the knowledge base article on like all of our suite of video conferencing options and the different things they can do, it can be somewhat overwhelming. And so I know it's been something that's been considered as to whether, you know, we want, you know, if you are doing this, this is what we suggest you use. Obviously you have these options, but, you know, because of the fact that it's just different than the way I think historically Wisconsin tends to work, where we don't tell people how to, you know, do things, what things they need to adopt. It's been a kind of necessary shift in perspective, but I think that is something that's being considered with respect to making things a little bit easier for people who don't want to figure out, oh, I'm going to have 200 people and I need to have this, and which of these options basically just say, this is the one we suggest for this application. But figuring out all the use cases is a difficult process to give that type of recommendation. And that's just for the video conferencing options.
Thank you, Sean. Would anyone else like to add to that? John?
Sure, I want to say, and I appreciate the mention of Canvas, because, you know, when we went to Canvas as the only centrally supported learning management system on campus, that was in large part in response to the fact that we had multiple learning management systems going on campus at the same time. And we knew that when we moved to one, we were going to improve student experience in that way. And I think what Sean said about a lot of those tools that we've got out there and the challenge of balancing the sort of Wisconsin decentralization with some kind of uniformity for our students. The other thing I just want to acknowledge is that sometimes, and I've actually just started thinking about this myself this week, but sometimes when students are having that different platform experience or different tool experience, it's not just the differences in tools from UW, like Zoom versus Teams, et cetera. It's a matter of they're using a textbook provided by a publisher, like Macmillan provides the course materials, and it might be embedded in Canvas, but you're jumping out of Canvas over into a Macmillan virtual platform that is where the material for the course is hosted. And that just adds another layer of that complexity on where we run into that same issue about uniformity and decentralization. So not an answer there at all, just to add to that complexity that students are facing. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Okay, I think we'll move on. We had hoped to wrap up this part by 3:30, but I feel like we're not quite there yet. So if any of our guests can stay a little longer, I think that would be helpful. If you can't, I certainly understand. Emily, go ahead.
Ren, I just wanted to interject that there's some stuff coming up in the chat about the need to focus on spring and improving things for international students and students in different time zones with asynchronous options. And I wanted to highlight that and also let folks, everyone on the call know that Marissa DeGroot, the communications coordinator with OUA, is taking notes and keeping track of all of this. So again, we can make sure these things are addressed. John.
Yeah, I just want to briefly, because I saw that in the chat and wanted just a chance to talk about it. And this is actually something that I would invite folks on the call to give us input on. There's a real tension around the synchronous, asynchronous. So we know that synchronous online learning activities pose those kinds of access issues, especially for international students, but also for students even on campus who may find it difficult for one reason or another, whether it's technology or, hey, I'm in a quarantined residence hall and my roommate is here and it's really hard to do the synchronous thing. So we know that synchronous causes those kinds of access issues. And on the other hand, some of what we're hearing is that if there aren't synchronous activities in a course, students' sense of connection and engagement goes down. And so that synchronous component feels important there too. And so one challenge we have is how to balance those. And so this is just a kind of plea for any additional insights you have along those lines would be really helpful for us to hear.
And when our panelists are asking for feedback, you can send that feedback to me. So write me an email. Don't worry that you think I'm too busy and you don't want to bother me. Write me an email with your thoughts about whatever, and I will make sure that it gets to the right place. So we just have one place. You can just send them to me and I will triage them. Now I think I actually figured out how I can see all of the people at the same time. So definitely wave if you want to talk. Anybody else want to talk about synchronous, asynchronous? Shirin.
Yes, we also have concerns about the quality of the online or remote course when it's asynchronous. That requires a lot more attention to instructional design, good technology, creating slides, videos, things that work. So there is a bit of a drawback when we go to asynchronous and we cannot provide the instructional design that instructors need. Whenever we're recommending synchronous, we're always asking that the sessions to be recorded so they can be viewed at other times. And when there are mandatory assessments are happening, accommodations are made for students that are in other time zones.
Thank you, Shirin. Karen W.
I want to also point out, though, the importance of the balance, because a lot of the synchronous activities are also having difficulties, and a lot of that has to do with systems. A lot of that has to do with connectivity, and we focused a lot on student connectivity issues, which are things we definitely need to focus on, but our instructors are also having connectivity issues. So I think this is where we need to be working on the balance between synchronous and asynchronous, just like John suggested, in order to find how to get the course content delivered, and yet also how to have that engagement piece. So I don't want anybody to go away thinking it's one or the other. They both are having problems for different reasons and for different populations of people. So I just want to put that plug in there about the importance of asynchronous opportunities because they're always available.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, Emily, let's move on.
Molly Donnellan has had her hand up. Thanks for waiting, Molly.
Sure, thank you. And I think Matt Douglas is ahead of me, but if he's lowered his hand, then, feel free to cut me off if I don't mean to cut someone else off. I'm Molly Donnellan, the International Studies Major Advisor. I had what is hopefully a quick question about undergraduate access to libraries. Particularly, I've been working with a couple students who are trying to make progress or start their senior theses or directed studies. And library access has been is like available for faculty and graduate students, but our understanding is that undergraduates are not allowed to physically access the materials they need, that there are curbside options available, but the soonest pickups that our students could schedule were already a couple weeks out, which theoretically, if all things go well, we'll be back in person, and then they would have access to the library again anyways. And so I'm just wondering, because we've also been working then with the faculty members who are the advisors for these senior theses, if there's I guess, advocating for undergraduates who are enrolled in senior theses or directed studies to have access to that research material in person in the same way that graduate students and faculty members can, and or how can our faculty members and instructors kind of advocate to support that so that, you know, seniors don't have to just put their research on hold for 2 or 3 weeks. It's kind of a good time in the beginning of the semester for them to get things in line and sorted and start that research. And so, you know, just taking the 2 or 3 weeks off because you don't have access to the library is really going to affect things down the line for their research. And I know it's not revenue generating because they're undergrads, but I think it's a really important component of a lot of undergraduate programs, if not a required part. So before I fall into a rambling trap, that's kind of my question. If it's not clear, please let me know. I'm happy to clarify. But just if we can put that message up to campus leadership of advocating for undergrads library access, and or how can faculties and instructors advocate for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. I do think that that is being advocated for. I think Steve is working on some of those things. Steve, do you want to add anything? Or
Not
is
much
it
to
good?
add. We largely agree with you, Molly. I'm sorry to say, I don't think there's much hope of getting them open before, you know, the end of the day on the 25th. But it's a high priority to try to get them open after that.
The other thing that I understand is a high priority to try to reopen is some of the reservable private study spaces that had been available to students, because we need students to have some privacy sometimes to do their work. Okay, Emily, go ahead.
Matt Douglas, thank you for waiting.
Sure, thanks. Not much of a question, just a comment. I'm the advisor for Student Print, and some of our student staff here has sort of mentioned that the online or the synchronous learning has been a little bit challenging to navigate. It's taking a little bit more time for them in their classes. It's also more demanding than the in-person classes have been. Some of the feedback I'm getting is they're asked to do all of these additional tasks as part of the class that they normally wouldn't have done. So I think the consensus is that the online format is harder for people that aren't used to it. I just wanted to interject that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. I think we've heard that. I've heard that coming up quite a bit. Do any of the panelists want to respond to that? Otherwise, we can have that as a piece of noted feedback. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. And that is not the first time I've heard that. So I'd like to wrap this part of the session up in just 2 or 3 minutes. Emily, do we have anything else that we want to bring forward?
I think the other additional things are in the chat, and we're capturing them to share with all of our panelists here and probably beyond. And I think folks are ready to move to some questions about housing and spring calendar.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So again, if you have specific feedback regarding the instructional mission and aspects of the institution, please send it to me, and I will make sure that our special guests today are brought in to help with that feedback. And thanks to the special guests for joining us and being part of the team to support students, advisors, and instructors. We're all in it together. All right, we're going to transition at this point over to Diana Mackey, who is going to give us some updates on all the other stuff that we're managing as an advising community. So Diana, it's yours.
All right, I'm going to be pretty fast here today because I know we're running a little over, but just want to start by saying I really appreciate seeing some of you, being in community with you. I really look forward to these each week. So I'm going to provide just a couple of quick updates. You probably know about all of these, but potentially some questions will come up that we can address here as the meeting goes on. I think everybody hopefully saw that there has been some tuition refund flexibility that was announced yesterday. So for students who choose to completely withdraw, it is possible to get a full tuition refund, and that's been extended, not extended, but offered through the end of the day tomorrow. If students are considering this, please connect them right away with their dean's office so they can discuss their situation. One of the things that we talked about at length at Apple yesterday was students who are also receiving financial aid. And so the dean's offices and the office of the registrar are going to be working really closely with financial aid to make sure that students who are receiving aid understand what will happen in regards to their aid if they're considering withdrawing. And like I said, this was discussed at length at Apple yesterday. And so if you do have students thinking about this, please send them to their dean's office. They're prepared to work with students within this really tight timeline. And just a reminder, this is only for students who are completely withdrawing for the semester, not just dropping some of their classes. The other thing, and I mentioned this last week, is about the spring calendar. You may have seen that the Faculty Senate voted on Monday to make changes to the spring calendar. So the term will now start on January 25th. With spring break essentially being reduced to just a long weekend, which is Friday, April 2nd through the 4th. Sorry if you're hearing some banging, and perfect timing for the work that's happening on my house right now. And then the last thing I'll bring up is last week, a couple of you brought up calendaring concerns. You talked about the frustrations of having to essentially duplicate calendaring. So having to do appointments in Starfish and then a separate calendar invite for inviting students to Teams meetings. That's something that we are working on. And we have our continuity website on the advising.withstudy fact staff site. So we're hoping to make some updates to that and make some recommendations to other options. I know some people put this in the chat, and I also am aware that some advisors are using personal rooms in Zoom and WebEx. And so started to look into that and if that's something that people want to use, to make some recommendations on how to use those, which will ease the calendaring within Starfish. So if you are somebody who is already using those, the personal rooms in Zoom or WebEx, and if you're doing it successfully along with Starfish and you'd be interested in sharing some tips with me so we can help produce some good documentation for people to follow, I'd be interested in hearing from you. So more to come on that soon, but reach out to me if you have any updates or if you have any information about using those personal rooms successfully. So that's all I have. I'm gonna turn it back over to Ren for the next part.
Thank you, Diana. So for the next announcement, we are joined by Kathy Cruz. Kathy, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Kathy Cruz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from the Dean of Students office, and I'm excited to be here.
So many of you may know this already, but we have a great partnership going on between the Dean of Students office, the Division of Diversity, Equity, Educational Achievement, University Housing, University Health Services, and the Advising Career Services communities to reach out and make phone calls, personal phone calls to all the students who are in isolation and quarantine, which I believe the number of students is near 3,000 now. And so we have been making calls over the past few days to students and talking to them about how they're doing and providing support to them, answering questions, but mainly just reaching out and being kind and supportive of the students in these circumstances. And so I'm here today to ask for volunteers for people who are interested in making some calls. The way it works is that you give me your name, I give your name to Kathy, and then Kathy reaches out to you with a list of students to call. So I did this myself, and I got a list of about 10 students. And I nervously called them because I had no idea how this was going to go. And they, some of them even answered the phone. Others of them then responded when I left a message or I emailed. And I just have to tell you that, I mean, all of you do more student contact than I do, but after making those calls, it was like the best I felt in a long time, because I felt like I had made an actual difference to somebody who was struggling. And you as advisors and career services may feel that more often than I do, but I just want to tell you that I thought this was a really good experience, and I would urge you, if you have time, and if you don't feel like this is going to put you over the edge into a place where you can't go, that you send me your name in an email, let me know you want to do this, and then I'll pass it on to Kathy. So I'll stop there and I'll see if anybody has any questions about the calling program or about anything Diana brought up. You can raise your hand or you can put your question in the chat, and then we will attempt to address them. So there's a question in the chat, Emily, I'm reading it too, that says, can you clarify what we are asking when we ask the students if they give permission for us to notify their school college? Great question. So we wanted to, the schools and colleges asked if they could get lists of students who had tested positive for COVID so that they could reach out to them. And there was a HIPAA issue with that. So this is asking students for consent to allow their name to be given to their school and college as someone who's isolated or quarantined, so that the advisor could reach out if the school and college wants to handle it that way. Kathy, did I get that right?
You got it totally right. And when they ask, I mean, your response can be, yeah, it's just another layer of support. Your school or college, your advisor cares about you too. And so just passing it on so they too can support you and support you in the classroom. So yeah, we have had a few questions about that, but most of the students are like, sure.
And it may seem strange that we have to ask this because they probably are like, why do you have to ask this? You're already calling me. But we're calling them with lists that come right out of health services, which I think is a different HIPAA thing than the lists going in some other direction. But I'm really talking about things I don't know about right now. So that's why we need to ask them. So other questions about the calling program or anybody that wants to share an anecdote about their own experience? See a couple good anecdotes in the chat. Okay, well, I hope we get some more volunteers. Kathy, how many more students do we need to assign to a caller?
Well, that is a great question, Ren, because some of you guys were in a meeting with me a couple days ago, and I was saying, what does the number 1,561 mean to you? Well, it was the number of students we still had to assign. But now we are down to 768. So, you know, there might be a line to make these calls because it's becoming such the hot thing to do on campus and everyone wants to participate in it. So get your name to Ren for sure. And I hope as I read these chats, yeah, it has been a very positive experience for a lot of people and the students appreciate it for sure.
A related
and
question.
Kathy,
Oh,
God.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Related question from the chat. Can you put a note in ANS or should you not if you make one of these calls? Anybody got an opinion on that?
That's a good question. I did not make notes in ANS for the calls that I made. It feels like a different thing to me. That's just an off-the-cuff answer. Kathy or Jeff Schockler, who's here, or anyone else want to comment on that?
I do not think the normal calls need to go in, but if something was elevated or needed, so we've had like a handful, and so then it would probably be appropriate, but for just the initial call, but those are then connected to the advisor, and so they would probably put the note in, but I wouldn't say the other calls need to be recorded because we have that in different data.
I'd concur with that.
Yep. Rihanna wisely points out not everybody has access to ANS that's making the calls, so we wouldn't want to make that a part of the protocol. So no, you don't need to unless something's been elevated or dealt with in a more involved way. Okay. So Erica is asking an important question there. She was copied on follow-up emails from some calls as the students were my advisees. That was, from what I understand, that was happening sort of in a kind of a contained way, and we asked for that to stop happening because it was kind of confusing the process. So the callers shouldn't be following up and copying advisors anymore. We felt like that was kind of confusing things, and it was a good idea, but we asked to kind of have that not happen anymore. All right, thank you. So I hope I'll have some emails of people who would like to participate in the calling, and thanks to those of you who put in the comments about your experience, and thanks to Kathy for working on this so diligently to help do this important work.
Thanks to all of you. Yeah.
All right, I am going to Now I'm going to toss it to Marissa, who wants to give us an update, and then after that, Emily.
Actually, Ren, I think I'm going to step in with both updates, but I do want to give a shout out to Marissa, who's capturing the major themes and the feedback items, and we'll be sending those out in a follow-up email to everyone who's on the call today. Feel free to share with others who might benefit from that information. The other thing that I wanted to come back to, Ren, is there were a few questions in the chat earlier about housing and who students should go to if they have questions about their contracts and and some other things that are happening related to the time that we're in. What was shared in the chat, and just to highlight it, is that students are being encouraged to work through their Res Life coordinators first. And then there's also a link, which Tara or Kayla, if you would put that link into the chat, where there are some new frequently asked questions related to Celery and Whitty residents, and that section has been updated. So just wanted to come back and highlight that.
Thank you so much.
So the other thing that we wanted to mention is University Health Services has put together a virtual health toolkit, and Marissa's gonna I just did post that in the chat. One of the things that I'm noticing in my own work with students, with colleagues, is we get a lot of links, and that is helpful. And I really appreciate people sharing the most up-to-date links. And I'm also realizing the time that's needed for me to process that. So I just want to acknowledge that. And the time that students need to process that. So I want to applaud advisors for being that personal presence that goes along with a link, because just getting the link often we know is not enough. It's knowing that somebody sees the student, hears their concerns, and is there to be a helpful presence as they're getting new information. And both really matter, the personal presence and the information that we're providing on links. The last thing that I wanted to share today is we've had a few offices share with us that they've been practicing some case studies together related to COVID, and they found that to be a helpful practice. So with some of their most frequently asked questions or concerns that come up from students, having some time with colleagues, either in their offices or other offices, to practice the words or find the resources together that will help students has helped them feel more prepared. And so the last thing I'll personally post in the chat today is a link to some of those case studies. And when time allows, and I know time can be in short supply, if it's helpful to you, we invite you to practice those case studies together or to create your own. So in a moment, I'll post those. And it looks like, yeah, I'm checking. I'm going to hand the mic back to somebody else and go back through questions from the chat to see if there's anything we've missed.
Great, and I would just like to open it up now to any questions, comments, or feedback that you want to share with the whole community here, or any of us that have been in speaking roles today. So just open dialogue time. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All right, so I'm going to go off script here, folks, and I would love to get a pulse check on how people are feeling. We didn't do this at the beginning of the meeting, so I'm going to do it at the end. Can you put in the chat a link, or not a link, so used to saying the word link, a word or phrase that describes how you're feeling right now about your work? And we'll just see. I'm kind of curious if it's the same as last week, or better or worse. So one word or phrase that describes how you've been feeling about your work. Thank you. This is really helpful. I feel like the tone is a little different than last week, not a ton, but a little bit more about sort of in limbo. One of the things that our team is going to turn its attention to very seriously next week is spring schedule build and planning. It's very complicated. There are so many things that are sort of out of our hands and not decided yet that are making it really hard to move ahead. But we are, I want you to know and feel reassured that we understand how behind we are on that and how important it is to get that going. And so the registrar's office team and the academic affairs team and the advising team are all putting a lot of, what is it? Put your foot on the gas. We're really putting our foot on the gas about that next week. All right, any closing comments from any of our guests or any members of the career services or advising community? Marissa, do you have a closing comment or was that a wave?
I just wanted to share a resource quickly that came out of the forum last week. We got a lot of questions about who should students reach out to if they have questions or concerns when it comes to instruction. And we know a lot of those questions are coming to you. And so we wanted to provide a list of kind of the hierarchy of where those questions can go, who they should go to first, if they don't get the answers there, who they should contact after. So I'm going to throw that in the chat right now. And again, these links and everything else, we're going to follow up with an email with the recording, these links and other resources too that you can share out.
Thank you. And Diana, did you have a comment?
Same thing, actually, exactly what Marissa just said.
Oh, good. Yes, I forgot to talk about that earlier. So thank you for doing that. Anybody else?
Ren, it looks like Kendra's hand is up.
Okay, let's go to Sharon since she's already unmuted, and Kendra, you can go next.
I just want to express my gratitude and thanks to all the hard work and good work that our advisors are doing. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And Kendra.
Hey, everyone. I guess I just want to emphasize out loud, because it kind of got buried, that I think a lot of us were pretty disappointed and frustrated in the communication about the spring calendar, namely that these decisions were made on Monday and it took until I think today for that information to actually come to us and inside UW. In the meantime, people were chatting about it. We were seeing it on Reddit and the news, students, parents, etc. were asking about it. And so we all sort of knew, I guess, it was happening unofficially. But the fact that we didn't get like an email announcement or anything like that was pretty disappointing. I think compounded with the fact that people feel frustrated that they didn't really feel like they had a say and opinion in any of that happening. And I know a lot of people use that time for breaks, to take a break to catch up on other things. And obviously we can't control that, but I think people felt like we didn't matter and we didn't need to be told about that, and that it was sort of above us or beyond us, if that makes sense. So I just want to reiterate, for communications, we just really want to be kept in the loop when these sort of things come up.
Thank you, Kendra. That's really helpful. I think we need to go back and review what the plan was and why a direct email to advisors didn't happen. I mean, that's largely my fault. So I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. There's a few comments in the chat supporting what's been said.
Hey, Ren.
Any other? Yes.
Hi. So
Hi.
I know how open you are, and so I've hesitated saying this because I know folks are thinking it, but I just want to model how really truly open you are to these conversations. There's a lot of frustration and anger right now, confusion, and I don't know that really was allowed to come out at the beginning, potentially because of who was in the room. And I know that this group who's in the room, we don't have control, right, over all the decisions being made, and people are trying their best. To hear the chancellor say that she would do it all again is really, it's challenging to hear. It's not going well. It's just not, and it's very unclear how it could have gone better. with the plan that was in place, and we're in the middle of that, and I know you are as well. Why football is coming back. So I love our work. I love our students, right? We have important jobs and I believe in it. I do not believe in the decisions that are being made at a top level right now, and that's really hard. So there's a big disconnect, and I'd have to say that it's the biggest disconnect that I've ever felt in 14 years of working here. And we will get through this. I think it's really important for you to know the trust and the dismay and the frustration, the level of that. And I appreciate you hearing this, and I know you're open to it, which is why I'm saying it in this forum. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you all know I am open to it, and my ability is only so much to communicate it up, and I do that as often as I can. But some decisions are being made at only the very, very top level without involvement. And it's frustrating and hard for all of us, myself included. So thank you for sharing that. The athletic decision is so far above any of us that it is really frustrating. Thank you. Others?
Ren,
I see
Michael.
Michael.
Yeah.
Michael, go ahead.
Oh, hi, thanks. I was just, with some conversations so far with students, and I don't know if it can be part of these meetings, but it's very clear that people's time to degree is definitely going to be different than what was there. And I don't know where an acknowledgement from the university is going to come from. Hopefully there will be one, but given the way some things have gone, that might be something they might be reluctant to say. But I'm guessing that those of us that are meeting with students, that's going to be a conversation we're going to have and address. And certainly Summers can help with that. But I think, when we have so many people trying to get onto professional programs and graduate programs, and GPA is important, the concern is students are going to try to pile on coursework just to get done still in a certain time frame. And obviously we'll be saying it and having the conversations with students, but it would be nice to have some support from the university in acknowledging that you're going to be off kilter here a little bit, but we'll do our best to get you to your next step.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Michael. I'll need to think about what that acknowledgement looks like. And feedback about that would be helpful. Other comments? People want to weigh in on what we've been talking about? I'm open to stay longer to have time to have people's feelings come out.
Christopher Lee has a hand up.
Oh, thank you. Christopher.
Yeah, thanks. This is just to follow up on the feeling of being sometimes left out of the loop. I've been involved in discussing some of the things that were going to come, but not actually making the decision. So been on committees where we've made recommendations and such. And the fact is, I find out about them from Madison.com if I want to know. And that I agree that that's really not the way it has to be. Yeah, it would be possible. I mean, people contemplating these decisions know that they're contemplating the decision, and there can be stuff that's prepared to go out if the decision is made. And I just want to say that the emotions that I was hearing expressed here resonate. I don't feel terribly out of the loop because of my position. I've ended up in a lot of interesting discussions, but I still don't know what's going to happen until after it has happened, until after it has been reported.
Thank you, Christopher. Others?
Ren, we have a few hands up.
Yep.
Looks like Erica.
I have all the feelings too that have been expressed here, but the one that is driving me bananas is the sound bit that says there is no linkage of these cases to classes, but then they took people out of the classes. It's all to congregation, and now we're having football. It is killing me. which then makes me think, I really would love there to be a class, like a 1-credit class that starts after the drop deadline. Couldn't your department make a lot of money, butts and seats on literacy and science and literacy in the news? I think that these are skills that our students really could use, well, and probably many of us could use some beefing up on that. So if your department wants to teach a new class, I think you should develop a understanding science in the media class, and you do a lot of help in our work.
Thanks, Erica. Great, great point.
We have Molly Donnellan.
For the second time in the same day, sorry. But I think the frustration that I'm completely echoing with everyone else just personally, but then it also is compounded because I think, and I've talked with a couple other folks, but it feels like it maybe affects our ability to be good advisors and serve our students if we're Googling and searching for resources and answers to their questions because we're finding out about updates at the same rate they are. You know, I probably spend the first half hour, 45 minutes of every morning just checking the Smart Restart page and looking for updates because I have frankly lost trust that campus is going to update us with stuff. And I know that that was kind of part of it, that we should be checking that anyways. It's a daily thing, but it is just one more thing to have to do. And I feel like I'm, you know, constantly in like a Google search mindset or a whisk.edu search mindset to find answers to questions that if we had been or are given a little bit more of a heads up or a little bit more context in how and why decisions are made, we'd be better prepared to address these questions. And knock on wood, fingers crossed, whatever you do for luck, that would help us feel less frustrated. I don't know. This is a rose-colored glasses view, I guess, but I just, that frustration or it has been tiring in that sense to feel like we're finding out about updates at the same time as our students, but being expected at the same time to know the answers to the questions that we then get at 8:30 at night when they put that announcement out. So I will get off my soapbox. I know it's after 4. I just wanted to share that feedback, and thank you very much for listening and for giving us this space to share it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really tricky. I completely hear you, and I hear the updates often at the same time you do. Sometimes, as Christopher said, we know they're being considered, but we're told that it's embargoed or private or whatever until the announcement comes out. Because I think the institution, because there's so much media attention, doesn't want things to get out ahead of the chancellor's announcements. And so we get stuck in this bind then that it all comes out at once. And so people know about it, but they all know about it at once. And then you don't have the opportunity to prepare, learn, think, strategize about how you're going to work with students. I don't know what to do about that because of the sort of way the institutional communications works. But I absolutely can be sensitive to the fact that, and more sensitive to it, that just because something's in the newspaper doesn't mean that's the communication we can consider it communicated. There's always a good idea to have a follow-up to the advising community on all of those and to the career services community on those things. But getting information earlier than it goes out to the media is going to be a tough one. I don't know how to address that.
Nikki has a hand up. Nikki, do you still have a question or comment you want to share? Tech issues from Nikki. Okay. Anybody else have something they want to share as Nikki's doing some tech troubleshooting? Wondering if there is any student survey being discussed. Nikki just posted in the chat. Yeah, there is. So John Zembrennan, who you saw earlier, but who had to go to another meeting, is leading the effort to think about assessment and feedback from students. And so I don't know much more about it than that right now, but there is an effort to think about coordinating a campus level survey. But I know the schools and colleges and other programs have also wanted to and done their own surveying. And so this is another example of sort of central, decentralized kind of challenge. But yes, that is being thought about at a campus level. I don't know if any of our school college people that are still here want to comment on anything that's been done at the school college level related to student feedback.
Okay.
I think we were all told to hold on and pause until, because there was going to be a centralized survey. So that's the last I heard. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Other questions or comments?
Just
I will
another.
share. Okay.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, Ren. Just another comment in the chat about being also informed by parents who are being communicated with before staff about changes like the tuition reimbursement. So just another important example of ways we could advocate to do better.
Yes, absolutely. And that one was a really tricky one because it was held in secret until it went out as a press release. And then I forwarded you that press release, but the parents could have gotten it faster, right? And so it's tricky, but I really hear what you're saying, and I'm going to give some good thought to how we can try to mitigate that. Okay, it looks like we're wrapping up. So I think it's really important that I have the permission from you, which I hope I do, to share the kind of frustration that came out now with the people that were here at the beginning of the meeting. And the presence of those people, as Molly led with, may have curtailed some of your willingness to express things earlier. But there's something to be said for people hearing it directly from you and not always filtered through me. And so I hope in future conversations, when there are leaders that are higher up the chain in the room, if there's any degree to which you feel comfortable expressing more of the way you're feeling, I think it can only help. And I will continue to advocate and speak on your behalf as I always do. So thank you. I'm glad we were able to get some of it out here in the second part of the meeting. So thanks to everyone who helped put this together. Manuela, is that a hand?
Ren, I was just going to say, I mean, there are reps here from every school and college in similar positions as mine. And I think that we also can say that we can, not for you not to just be alone in that communication, right? That we can carry that communication as well. Because I know that it's something that we're hearing in our space as well. And it's something, honestly, I'm also just a little concerned about all the one words that came up and in the spot that we're in. And I think that as a community, and it's not just happening here, that sense of being tired, overwhelmed, overburdened, lack of control, lack of information, that's happening everywhere. And I think we need to find some resources for that. I don't know that it's just employee assistance. I'm at a loss, honestly, and I think we all are. And it feels very much out of control. There is a really good article that I just got today that speaks to some of this. I'll send it to you. You can decide whether or not you want to send it on. I don't know that it's any more helpful, but I think, you know, giving each other grace and patience that we're not in normal times, and we don't know what normal will be for a very long time. But I guess I just want to speak that just to make sure to let everyone here know that it's not just going to be Ren raising these issues. I think it's going to be those of us that are in these positions that can speak to it in other places.
Thank you, Manuela. Yeah, I had a conversation with someone today, and you know, the gist of the conversation was, you know, I wish we could just fix this. I wish we could fix it for all of the advisors and career services staff and students that we know are suffering so much, because we're used to fixing it. We're used to having tools to be able to fix a lot of things. And this is so big and so far reaching that we can't fix it. And it's just so hard. It's so hard for everybody to be in these positions of feeling powerless. So I understand, and I will continue on, and Manuela, thank you, and to the other guests that were here today, thank you for the support of the community. All right, I think we're going to sign off. Bye, everybody.